You need Hannity every day.
Between now and Wednesday, I'm going to challenge the candidates, all the other major candidates who are going to be on the stage with me at President Ronald Reagan's library. I'm going to challenge all those other major candidates to say, it's great to tell people you want to repeal Obamacare, but talk's cheap. Where's your plan? Have the courage to tell people what your plan is, because you cannot repeal Obamacare unless you've got a plan to do it. We've got a plan, and our plan starts on day one, the very first day we're in office. And there's more. On day one, as your president of the United States of America, I'm going to terminate the bad deal with Iran on the very first day. You see, now there are some other candidates, including some Republicans, who have a different view of that. They think it's something you should wait on until you put a cabinet and a team in Washington. And there are others who think, well, they can just leave the deal in place and they'll just make it work. I got to tell you, I've looked at this extensively. I've looked at it with experts from around the country and across the world. This deal, the deal that President Obama has with Iran, is bad for America. It is bad for Israel. It is bad for the world. I don't need to wait to have people in Washington tell me what I can and can't do. I know it is a bad deal today, and I will terminate that on my first day in office.
All right, 25 till the top of the hour. That will, of course, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. He's taken the position on Iran about repealing Obamacare, and he's also said no more Syrian refugees in the U.S. As it was announced earlier today, the U.S. is taking at least 10,000 people. My heart goes out to those people, Governor. By the way, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I agree with you. My heart goes out to them.
My heart goes out to them. But I got to tell you, we have an economic crisis where 94 million Americans aren't working and 50 million are in poverty. We have our own problems, our own refugees, if you will, in America that aren't participating in the American dream. And here's my bigger issue. 400,000 men we're talking about coming from Syria and Iraq. Now, I'm sure that most of them are good people. I'd bet any amount of money. But will ISIS, Al-Qaeda, terrorist organizations use the refugee issue as a means of infiltrating European countries and maybe America? And how do we possibly determine or ascertain the difference between a terrorist and those people that genuinely need help and support?
Well, there are all sorts of problems. One of the things that you haven't heard, I don't think, from any of the so-called Main Street media outlets is that we already do, and we have in the past taken refugees. In fact, the past year alone, we've taken something close to 70,000, which several thousand are from Syria. And we've spent in the last few years something close to $4 billion, with a B, $4 billion in terms of humanitarian aid related to that. So anybody who doubts that we, questions whether or not we're up to doing it, we have. The problem is we're not addressing the problem. The problem is Syria, and Syria is ISIS, and it's Assad. You've got Iran and now Russia propping up Assad, a brutal dictator who's done horrible things to his own people. And you've got ISIS having safe haven in places like Syria. And this is largely because of the failure of the Obama-Clinton doctrine to lead. Remember 3 years ago, this president drew a line in the sand, allowed it to be crossed.
Absolutely. He allowed it to be crossed.
Hillary Clinton allowed us to back out too early despite the military objections out of Iraq, and look what we have, exactly what they predicted. We need a president who's actually going to lead and deal with the source of the problem, which is Assad in Syria and it's ISIS in Syria. It's not the refugees. That's just a symptom of the problem.
Let me ask you, there was an article that came out today that you're sort of hitting the reset button on your campaign a little bit. One thing that some of your supporters that I know call the radio program, that they thought in the first debate that maybe you weren't the high energy person that they tend to know from Wisconsin and their experience watching you with the recall, et cetera. Do you think that maybe you came out just a little bit too careful?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Explain.
The bottom line is that people, we took everything in, listened. I'm a Midwesterner. I kind of polite. I'm not going to be rude.
By the way, I love Midwesterners, so that's not a problem for me. Yeah. But I also grew up in New York.
I'm not going to be rude, but I do think passion. I think America. There's a difference between anger and urgency. A lot of the media people nationally seem to think that there's anger amongst Republicans, and there might be amongst some. What's more, I think, the case, more reflective of what's really out there, and what I hear talking to people, is there's a sense of urgency that Americans want people who are going to keep their promises, who are willing to go big and bold. They want to know there's a passion out there to get things done. And that, I think, is our strongest selling point, is that you don't have to wonder. We actually did it. We had 100,000 protesters. We had death threats. We had recalls. We were number one targeting it last year. We did not back down. Now we've got a plan to wreak havoc on Washington. We're not going to back down from that either once we're president of the United States. And I think people want to hear that, and that's what they're going to hear from me on Wednesday. We're not backing down. We're ready to wreak havoc on Washington, put the people of this country back in charge of their government.
You know, I like what you're saying about Iran. I like what you're saying about the Syrian refugees. I like, the thing I've always liked about you the most, and repealing Obamacare, the thing I've always liked about you the most, though, is the fact that you put your entire political career on the line because of the principles that you believed in to transform your state, and it worked. I mean, when you really think about it, politically speaking, it was a pretty risky proposition to go forward knowing that the recall was pretty inevitable. And I don't know if people see that side of you yet. And, it's still very early in the process, I would argue. 5 months is an eternity in politics. So what is going to be different? That's what I'm asking.
Well, that's where we started today. In fact, I was at Eureka College. This was so awesome. I stood on the same stage that Ronald Reagan found his voice as a first-year student at Eureka College many years ago. And I talked about what an impact Ronald Reagan had on me as a young man and how I came to life. And I told the story years ago of how right after I took office, and you know this because you talked about the time, but before the protests even started, I had my cabinet over and said, here's what we're going to do, a little rah-rah, kind of a pregame coach talk, and talked about how Reagan, years ago, early in his term, had taken on the air traffic controllers because it was the right thing to do. They had defied the law. He fired them. People forget that was bold, but people forget it was a huge political risk at the time because if things have gone bad, that could have been the end of his presidency. Instead, it was one of the defining moments because he didn't care about the election. He cared about doing what was right. That's what we tried to do in Wisconsin, and thank God we were successful in doing that. And now we're going to lay out every week. Today, what I announced today was our day one plan to wreak havoc on Wisconsin. You got to have a plan that starts on day one. We laid out a number of the things with Obamacare, with Iran, with pulling back on the unlawful executive actions this president did on illegal immigration, getting rid of that on day one as well. Every week going forward now, starting next week, with taking on organized labor nationally, not just in Wisconsin, we're going to lay out another piece of that plan and show real solutions to move this country forward.
I think the American people are crying out for solutions. I think, I put forward the conservative solution caucus at the beginning of 2014. I advised Republicans, run on issues, differentiate yourself from the Democrats, explain what their vision is. I would argue that if you ask most people today, if I sent a microphone down on the streets, most people would not be able to articulate what the Republican Party stands for. And I think that's a big political problem. And I'll tell you the other problem that Republicans have, and you tell me if you disagree. If you look at the polls, you got Trump and Carson and Carly, et cetera, although you're ahead of Carly in this latest poll that came out today. But if you look at the polls, I think they're screaming at Republicans in Washington. And I differentiate governors like yourself and Bobby Jindal and John Kasich and Rick Perry and other guys. I make a big differentiation here. But Republicans ran in 2014 on stopping executive amnesty, and they didn't do it. And people are angry. Do you think that has contributed?
I agree with you more. I think that's an accurate reflection of what's happening in the polling. It's why for someone like me to break through, I've got to continue, and I'm going to do that on Wednesday in the debate. I'm going to continue to push it going forward to say, hey, I share your anger. For goodness sakes, these people told us if they elected Republicans in both houses, the House and the Senate, we would have a vote to repeal Obamacare. Here we sit after Labor Day. There's no bill on the president's desk. You talk about what he did on amnesty. If it had not been for me and 24 other Republican governors going to court to block him, the Congress didn't stop it. The leadership didn't stop it. We governors stopped it.
Yeah, but that's the problem. I think you get...
People are frustrated with Washington. Yeah. We're the ones, as much as anybody in this race, have shown I can withstand the heat it takes to wreak havoc against the status quo. I will do that in Washington. I just got to make that case over and over and over and over again.
Does it frustrate you, where the polls are now? Do you understand what's happening? Do you think that getting that message through is part of your strategy that's going to work?
I think the key is Wednesday. We've got sometimes some of the folks in some of the other national media outlets act like you have one debate and that's it. There are 9 debates. That means there's 8 more. There'll be 7 after next Wednesday. We just got to continue to have solid performances, not only at the debates, but every week. Like I said, our plan is to lay out another part of our overall plan to wreak havoc on Washington and to show people we're not just saying bumper sticker things. We're telling you exactly what our solutions are, and we're so confident about it. We're going to tell you how we're going to start on day one to show you just how serious we are. I think people are cynical, and they have a right to be cynical when they look at the mess in Washington. Take a breath, everybody. Look at who's really said things and done them versus those who just said them. We fight, we win, we get results, and we do it without compromising our conservative principles. If that's what you want out of the next president, then I need your help at scottwalker.com.
What about this USA Today reporter that signed a petition to recall you? What the hell was that about?
Well, welcome to my world.
Jeez.
I had plenty of those along the way. You'd think, I had that. I had judges. I had prosecutors. I have others who just didn't think there was any sort of conflict of interest. But that's why to me, it just makes my point. When I tell people, if they wonder who is prepared and capable to take on all the nonsense that's happening in Washington, who's not going to back down? There's a lot of good Republicans, many of whom I'm sure are well-intentioned, but nobody has faced the kind of scrutiny and attacks and abuse that we have over the last 4.5 years. We never backed away from those challenges. If given the chance to be the president, we're going to wreak havoc in Washington. We're going to put the people of this country back in charge. And it's going to be a good day because we've been tested. We can get it done. I
noticed you weren't afraid to take on Hillary Clinton and her phony apology. You actually tweeted out, "I'm sorry about that. Is not an acceptable response for putting your convenience above the safety of the American people." I don't even think it had anything to do with convenience. My only disagreement is I'm glad you went after her. I think the apology was phony because she said, I still did everything legally. Everything was within bounds. That's just not true.
It is an absolute joke, and people say this is an email scandal. It's not an email scandal. This is a national security scandal. She put your security, my security, our children's security at risk. I joked about this at the last debate. I wish it wasn't funny, but it's largely likely the Chinese and the Russian governments know more about her email server than do the members of the United States Congress. That is, as funny as it was, it's not a laughing matter when you realize how true that is, how accurate that has been. And this is somebody who will do just about anything to keep herself in power. Well, and this scandal now, I've
got to give you credit, though. I think you had the best line of any candidate so far in this election year. And going up against Trump on Twitter is pretty tough. When you said, "Are you going to delete that apology?" That was hilarious.
Well, you got to have some fun along the way. And I said, it's with Hillary, either laugh or cry. It's so pathetic out there just how awful this is. But we cannot for a moment, though, back down and think that there won't be incredible advantages on her side from the many in the national media who desperately, despite all this nonsense, still want to keep someone as liberal as her in the White House. And so we're still facing a tough battle. We faced her and President Clinton and President Obama and all the liberal special interest groups now before. We're not afraid to take her on. I'd love to have that bet. I'd love to go head-to-head and say, Hillary Clinton, everywhere you touched in the world is worse off today than before you and the president took office. You might be a good deceiver-in-chief, but you're not going to be a very good commander-in-chief. I'd love to have that debate anywhere, anytime in America.
I really hear a re-energized Governor Walker here. It sounds to me like you've just taken the gloves off and you said, "I'm going for this." Am I misreading this?
No, absolutely. Getting out. One of the best things I've done is getting out. I was on my Harley Labor Day weekend. I was riding a Harley around the state of...
By the way, how did you get your wife to say okay to the Harley? Because mine says no. How did you pull that one off?
I always wear a helmet, protective gear, and I never drink till the bike's parked for the night. But getting out there, getting pumped up...
I'll agree to those things, and I still can't have one. My wife bought me... You know how embarrassing this is? My wife bought me a Vespa, Governor. I'm like, I'm not riding that stupid thing. It's embarrassing.
I would have been recalled in Wisconsin if I wasn't riding a Harley.
Exactly, right? Well, anyway,
yeah.
Governor, we're going to see you. I think you're on the air with us after. I guess the debate ends next Wednesday at 10, and you're going to come on our show after the debate. We're looking forward to seeing you then.
We're looking forward to it. Thanks, Sean. Looking forward to see you then.